listening to a Day in the Life podcast brought to you by the International Myeloma Foundation. Today we are talking to Robert Pugh. Robert is a resident of Charlotte, North Carolina. He is a retired businessman, pastor, and a father of 4 grown children. He's also a myeloma patient who helps other patients self-advocate for their care. We invited him on today to learn how he remains positive when facing challenges. To begin, I understand, Robert, you were diagnosed with myeloma in 2014. Can you recall for us how you reacted to the diagnosis at that time?
When I went into the office and he mentioned myeloma, of course, I had no idea what it was. And so I was somewhat not shocked, but I was very curious about what was next. When I went to my particular doctor, he saw a height in my calcium. He had me take some tests. And then he said, go and see this particular doctor. Now, that was the oncologist. When I arrived at the location and I saw on the building what it said, cancer in blood, I had a tear that came to my eye. And it was something that I generally say that often the heart knows what the lips dare not utter. And somehow I knew there was information in there that had to do with this. When he mentioned it to me, I didn't try to find out where it came from. I needed to know where I was. Okay, well, what are you saying to me and what's next? I told him that I was a runner and that I was preparing for a race within the next month or two. And of course, he asked me, he said, wow, you're in pretty good shape. And I said, tell me about the race. And he said, well, you can still run it if you want. He said, it's a very slow-growing cancer, and so you can run it.
So when you were first diagnosed, was it smoldering that was the diagnosis, or was it active disease?
It was active. At that time, they were not using that terminology. The MGUS and the smoldering and, it's there, but it's not here. They weren't there. You either have it and he gave me a number. He said almost 30% of your blood is impacted by this. For me, that sounds high. To him, it did not. But I said, okay, I need time. I need just a moment to digest this. And I took a couple of weeks to consider, not to make statements about what I'm going to do and not do, but just to let it air out. And I needed to listen to what was being said next, what I heard in my own heart.
And after you were diagnosed, what treatment regimens did you undergo or are you on today?
It was called the Revlimid, Velcade, and dexamethasone, which is an induction therapy. And this is the first line. Very often people only get 2, maybe the Revlimid and the Dex or the Velcade and the Dex. But I had a 3-step, which is Revlimid, Velcade, and dexamethasone, and those were all chemotherapies, after which I did 5 regimens, which are 28-day cycles, 5 of those, and a month off, and then I did a stem cell transplant.
How have you fared since this transplant? Have you had to continue maintenance therapy, or are you in a remission, or how are things going?
I take low-level maintenance, and that's the extent of anything I do medically. I go in every month for my labs, but yes, so I do the maintenance. I did not achieve that 100% zero number after the stem cell transplant, but I was all right with that. I didn't need perfection to go forward.
And as you mentioned when you talked about your diagnosis, is that you were training for a 15K. I understand you ended up completing that 15K eventually. What did it take to do so?
15K is a very difficult race. It's 9.3 miles. I had run it 18 years. And these type races are my personal power. I assume everybody has something in their life that they use to motivate themselves. For me, it has been this 15K to maintain some type of physical strength all throughout my life, to be able to put that strength to work. And it's hard on your bones. And as you get older, I was in shape for it, so I wasn't concerned. So this hard on the bones thing, after I began to read information about myeloma and not knowing yet how far I was in, what damage had been done, I know that it will damage the bones. And in my idea, I don't want to run and come down the hill and your bones can't take it. Now, my bones were strong enough, but these were cautions. And so when he told me that I could run the race, I had an immediate shift in priorities. The race was not as important anymore compared to this danger that he had talked to me about that had entered my life. I race versus cancer. I said, "Look, can we start treatment?" I'll run the race at another time. And that's what happened. We began the treatment, and I began to, of course, absorb what this treatment was going to do. And for the next year, the very next year, I wanted to run, couldn't do it. The following year, I went down and I did the first thing I'd ever done in my life. I ran a 5K. For me, that's a warm-up. And that was tough because I had been off almost for a year and a half. And then my weight fluctuated. I've never been up high in my weight, so my weight was high. And I said, I can't run 10 miles, with this kind of weight. And it turned out, I said, I have to. I cannot continue to wait for perfection before I run this race. And so I ran last year, and I completed the race. And oh my, all the lights came on. I felt like, I was moving back into an area where I could depend on myself physically to do anything I want to do. And my anything has kind of come down, so it's okay. But I have run that race. It took a lot of courage. I drove by myself to Florida from Carolina, which was about 6 hours. And I mentioned it because, I have my family, they, God, you're going to run and you're going to drive. And, they were all afraid. So I tried not to tell them too much. This was my thing. And so I went down and I ran, and it was a personal challenge to help get me beyond the mindset that you're injured, that you cannot do certain things. And it's so important to me.
When you talk about mindset, I understand before you retired, you worked as a medical device manufacturing in business with that, and you were also a pastor. How would you say your work as a pastor has informed your experience of living with myeloma?
My goodness. There's a certain humility from that spiritual perspective when you look at the allness, the bigness of what's created. Us as human beings in this world we live in, it's huge. And so I tend not to take events and make them bigger than the moment. That begins to help me, and I have time to be reminded of what this body is that was made, that we have, and how it's been able to endure and to respond and to recover. And so here we are. When I found out, you have this choice. Are you going to start praying for healing and, take this away, God? And, and those types of things came to my heart, but I couldn't find any peace in asking for healing. Isn't that something? And so I never to this point have prayed and asked God to heal me. But what I did is I asked for endurance because I want to see what this is. There's some things you can only learn by experience. I want to know about this. So when I asked God to give me strength, it was strength to endure so that I can learn and see what it is that I could contribute. I wasn't afraid of what this was going to do. I put, the doctors do what they do. I will do what I'll do. But there's more to this, and I want to see. And that's how I went in. I committed to the hospital. Look, this is what you're going to do. I'm going to do everything you say, and I'm going to find out what I need to do. And I'm going to master my role. But I'm going to learn. And I began to learn. And as a pastor, I'm a lifelong learner, and I love and honor people. And I look at where they are, and how do you help people in this situation? I went into the situation to see, and I was able to learn, and I was able to recognize how, in fact, to help them without saying, God bless you, but how to really speak to where they were because I was familiar with it. And wow, yeah, that's priceless, and it's part of what I do now because it's so much love involved. It's real. You're not dealing with toys. People don't hide when you talk to them about this stuff. You don't have to convince them about anything. And so you're dealing with more truth, it appears, if they allow. And that's the thing. When they open their heart and talk to me, the doctor has already given them information they're going to have to study for 2 years. So I'm looking in their eyes, and I can see where they are. It was, if I may say so, there was a gentleman in the lobby, him and a young lady. They were both, close to in mid-60s. And I was speaking to him. He was coming out, and I was talking to him and his wife, and I could just feel something between them. And I said, "Is your wife there?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Look at her. She looked like she been in love with you since she was 5 years old." I said, "Which one of you are the patient?" And he said, "I am." I said, "Oh, she's taking such good care of you." And he looked over at her, and he began to cry. And that's where they are. They are more into their human spiritual place than they are in their head. I look to their heart, and I begin to speak to their heart. That's ministry. And it's easy as long as I don't go in there acting like I know stuff, because I don't. It's so different with each one of us, and they share, and they know you care. And so I really get to engage humanity on a different level. What could be better than serving the children of the kid?
Since your diagnosis, you've been an advocate for other patients, helping them to find the best access to care. And so with that in mind, and you kind of already touched on this with the couple that you just mentioned, what would you say to a newly diagnosed myeloma patient who may be feeling overwhelmed?
And that's the thing. They usually ask for what they want. For me, with new patients, when I walk into the room, there's a message. Because just like myself, we had never seen anyone that had myeloma. And it sounds like it's a doomsday. And so when they see someone, myself, that opens the door, and they say, "You have myeloma?" I say, "Yes, ma'am, I sure do. And here's what has occurred." And then I can ask questions, because once they relate and say that we're in the same place, some of their fear goes down, because suddenly they recognize I'm alive and I'm smiling, and I usually have on a suit for that reason, to impress them. That is my objective, not impress them in a flippant way, but in a way where they see normality is in your future, that you will get strong. And oftentimes the overwhelm is from a lack of information, a lack of security. They don't feel secure with the information they have. And so I go to them in their strength, whatever their strength is, what they're believing, where they may, be. And some of them have stories. "Oh, my uncle, he had a problem, and I might have it too." Yeah, you might, and you might not. So which one are you going to prepare for? And so I go right into, here's where we are. Yes, the tears are real. It's okay. And so I don't go into the pre-prescribed set of, I'm going to say this. I teach the class. There may be 8 in there, and I'll sit in there before it's my time. And they thought I was one of the doctors or something. And then again, when I stand up, I've recognized certain people and where they are, and what we need to do. And the information that they want is elementary. And I can speak elementary language. They just want to know, why is it I can't sleep? And what is this little pain? And so they just day to day. And so I help them separate what the doctors are going to do versus what they need to do. And that's how I approach them. I approach them right where they are and give them something.
Speaking of information, the IMF, part of our mission is empowering patients, providing them knowledge about the disease and the latest treatments available. When did you come in contact with the International Myeloma Foundation?
It was during this induction phase, that first 4 or 5 months. The cancer center that I am in, they're extremely good at educating, offering various levels of education and information, even if a lot of people don't take advantage of it. And in those sessions, they usually have on the table many of the books from the International Myeloma Foundation. And I began to get those books, on understanding your test results. So they have books on clinical trials and what is multiple myeloma and just all the little details. And so I came in contact by reading so much of their material. And then finally I had the opportunity, not too recently, to begin to really explore their website. But it started with the books. They were the foundation for my basic information. They were in support of many of the conferences that were in this area, both the small ones and one that came each year. I went to each one of them. They were mentioned very often by the medical training staff. Have you read this one, Robert? And so I found them an invaluable source, because we were also at that time discouraging other patients from going on the internet and just reading things because there was so much error that was critical. That was being pushed. So to find something that we could all trust and the doctor said, yes, this is it. It was really, really helpful.
And you are a Charlotte resident, so you may be familiar with what the IMF has begun there, which is the Empower Initiative. Empower is dedicated to removing barriers to care for the African American community and improving outcomes in the disease. In your experience, what would you say are some of the barriers to healthcare access for African American myeloma patients?
I looked over that, and your question said, what were some of the barriers to healthcare access for the African American? My first response is lack of access to healthcare, and that may be anything from transportation to there not being any quality services in that area, whether they're in a rural area or smaller area. So that access to care has been a big hindrance, as well as resources. They generally don't have the insurance or the background to the insurance to pay for the care. That is something also. The mistrust is a hindrance. Oh, my goodness. And I say that because, it's something that's got to be a better way to educate and get beyond that block. And it's the mistrust of the medical system based on historical trauma. It's real. It's there. And it's stuck in the hearts of many African Americans when it comes to real serious things like this. The more serious it appears, the more we back away. That's got to be approach. I haven't built on it yet. There was a lack of knowledge around what's needed. Where do you need to go? Your oncologist, a specialist? Because we listen sometimes and then say, wait a minute. Where are you getting treatment? And they'll say something. I said, you have a specialist. And sometimes, being here in Charlotte and you got the cancer center here in many cities, we assume they're specialists. And when I saw the numbers, that no, not at all. There's so many that's being treated outside of dealing with specialists. That becomes also a hindrance to the care. So that education process, education, insurance, and access. I think those are the three big ones that I've recognized and seen and talked to patients, because there's for example, there's financial assistance for medication, financial assistance that was so generous that I was just so surprised and so grateful to know it was so many organizations that was helping people. But yet the people, the African Americans, don't have the information. And they will qualify as fast as anyone else because it's not income guided. Not to the point that the majority of us would be impacted. They're well in six figures before they bother with you. So this information and education is being addressed. Yeah, the Empower, I've had conversations with the director here in Greensboro, and they're getting geared up to do some work. I intend to work with them.
That's great. I mean, your insights so far, just listening to you, have a great impact on the community and the myeloma community as a whole. Also, with the IMF, are you involved in any support groups, and what is that relationship like for you?
Yes, it was something that I think right after the stem cell transplant, I began going to a support group here. And for 2 years I went, maybe 2 years. It was what I needed. It's just, it's not like it's so much information, but you're sitting in there with a room of individuals who are all going through the same thing, and it's an opportunity to listen and to discuss. Sometimes you find out, wow, I'm doing real good. Because they'll tell you about some of the challenges they have, because this myeloma affects everyone so differently. And some come in and they look very difficult, and others come in and they look really great or for that day. But the support group and this gathering, IMF also has a finger in that. They make sure the reading materials are there. We have different type of speakers that will come in from organizations. But I find that the support groups are very helpful. You're in a land that you never even dreamed about, and it would help. I said I'd be 2 years because at that point, that's all I need. I appreciate it. I'll go back. But I began to start working, and they stay on the level with maybe the first year or two. Yeah. And that's where they need to be. They're in the right place. But I talk to the doctors. The doctors time to put together groups that cover, say, from 4 to 8 years. Those people, because they're living longer, the challenges are different, and they're still there. You've got to deal with toxicity now after you've been taking that medicine for 4 or 5 years. So we were looking into that too. Okay, how do we educate and keep up with the second tier, other than just saying you're doing real well? Yeah, but there's challenges. Only you taking that medication, you better keep up.
Just to wrap up, is there anything else that you would like to share with listeners about your experience as living with myeloma or just living well in general on a day-to-day basis?
For myself, I did not have a caretaker for a long time, so I was wearing 2 hats. I had to keep up with my patients. He likes to do things. So learning, cooking, making sure, the whole, I live that way, but now I have to cook a different type of food. My cleaning is concentrated a little more heavily. My walking, my point is that myeloma patient really has to take responsibility for their diet, their exercise, and communication. This is not intended for you to hurt or suffer. And sometimes we suffer in silence, thinking, oh, this is cancer, you're supposed to suffer. No, we got some good things going on. And if something is uncomfortable, you must tell your doctor. And being on the internet is nice. And has anyone ever had this problem? Please don't do that. Call your doctor, your nurses, and ask. Say, I'm having this issue. And they'll tell you, listen, that's common. Here's what we want you to do. And you find out you don't have to go through the difficult phases. The quality of life is much better when you are communicating and trusting that medical team. They've seen most of it already. And so I would encourage the patients, as it is, please, you don't have to become a super athlete, but during the course of the week, walk a few days, and put the sugar away a few days. And just take good care of yourself. And I'll tell you, the advancements that are made gives you that quality of life that if you support it and do your part, your children, your spouse, your family, they'll be all right. And while I'm speaking of that, if they're new for a year, try not to entertain everyone. If you're just coming out of stem cell, don't entertain anyone. Just say, people, I need a month. But take seriously what's told. If they say put the mask on, put the mask on. Your immune system can't handle the kind of bacteria that 9 children will bring into the room. And so, pay attention and be a doer, not just a healer. I was speaking with a nurse, and she was telling me all these things. The patient was telling her to listen. There's something I found out. Myeloma does not make you smart. It does a lot of things. We don't grow in intellect because of a disease. So we have to trust. Don't argue with the doctors. Trust them. If you don't know what they're saying, ask them twice. If you got a real bad sense, then, there's other decisions. I think that there's so much positive expectation and that the patients are learning well and taking responsibility that we have a rise in our sense of hope. I just hope that we continue. We just have to get to them for them to know that.
Thank you, Robert, for your time today. I think just by your example, and how you live each day and how you help others is a good example for everybody in the myeloma community and an inspiration in itself. So thanks again for your time. You've been listening to A Day in the Life podcast brought to you by the International Myeloma Foundation. To learn more about myeloma and the IMF, visit us at myeloma.org.